What's up, guys? So today I'm going to be talking about a 2021 mock offseason for the New York Jets. This isn't exactly the way that I think the New York Jets or Joe Douglas are going to approach the offseason, but this is how I would approach the offseason if I were GM of the New York Jets. But before I get into that, let's talk about the big story of the day. Deshaun Watson, it's been rumored that his top option is the New York Jets, followed by the Miami Dolphins. This is big news for the Jets. Like, who knows if it's, really true, what's going on behind the scenes, but there is smoke there. And I want to put it on record that, if I had any choice of an offseason path, it would be acquiring Deshaun Watson via trade. I mean, I'd give up the 3 first-round picks and some more just, to keep him away from the Dolphins and to secure ourselves a franchise quarterback. He's 25 years old. He's proven that he could win in this league. I mean, not this year, but in the past. He's proven that, he's an elite quarterback. He's a top 5 quarterback, and the Jets have been chasing that forever. So I would take the sure thing, and we'll still have some cap to build around him. This is a no-brainer. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to approach it as if this trade is off the table, that we have to do this with the assets we have. We have to do this organically, and, that's the approach I'm going to take. So before I hop into, who we're going to re-sign and who we're going to cut, whatever it may be, I think it's important to acknowledge that Robert Saleh is going to bring his 4-3 base defense to the New York Jets. In the past, the New York Jets have run a 3-4 defense. We're now transitioning to a 4-3. So some players we might have signed this offseason if we were 3-4 might not be brought back. So, in Robert Saleh's defense, I'm not, an expert when it comes to schemes or when it comes to watching film. But I did some research, and it seems that, Robert Saleh's defense, all of that pressure on the quarterback comes from the 2 defensive ends, right? He doesn't blitz too much. It would be nice to have an outside linebacker that could, rush the passer, but predominantly that edge rush, all that pass rush comes from those 2 down defensive ends. He needs a speed rusher at defensive end, which the Jets don't have, right? You need 2 defensive tackles, one of them, hopefully you get some pass rush presence out of those guys. And then you need a slightly bigger defensive end that could still provide, pass rushing ability. I don't think that's as glaring as a need as the speed rusher spot. And then as your linebackers, you have the weak side, the Will outside linebacker. You have the Mike, who's the middle linebacker. They both need to have the ability to cover and to, and to mirror the ball behind the line of scrimmage. And then you have your strong side outside linebacker, your Sam. And, I kind of look at them as a jack of all trades, right? They could do a little bit of coverage. They could do a little bit of run stopping. They could rush the passer, right? So those are the main spots. And then Robert Saleh likes to, have a zone with his corners. So let's keep that in mind as we approach this mock offseason. So let's dive in right now. So we're starting with $64 million of cap space. Spot Track has us at 65, and over the cap has us at 63. So let's go right in the middle at 64 million. This number seemed low to me. I'm not going to lie to you. But I think this has to do with, the salary cap coming down, right? Like I think it was above like 200 million. Like they expect it to go down to 175. So I think that's taking that into account when estimating our available salary cap. With that being said, we're going to use that number. Maybe free agents might not get as big of deals this year because the cap is down and teams don't have as much to spend. So I'm going to split this into a couple sections. We're going to have who we're going to cut, any potential trades, who we're going to re-sign, and then who we're going to sign in free agency, and then who we're going to draft to fill out that roster to get us ready to run out of the tunnel in September and go shock some people and win some games, right? The first cut I'm going to make is Henry Anderson. I actually think he could play in this scheme, but this would save us $8.2 million. I think Henry Anderson is a solid player. He had 1 or 2 really good years with the Jets. You haven't seen him flash as much recently. He's done great things with us, and I really did enjoy having Henry Anderson on the team, but I think it's just best if we move on and reallocate that cap space elsewhere. I'm going to also cut Alex Lewis. Like Henry Anderson, he was a solid player for the Jets. This really came down to keeping him or Greg Van Roten. Greg Van Roten, this move saves a little bit more than cutting Greg Van Roten. I think they're similar players, so I'm going to keep Greg Van Roten. I'm going to let Alex Lewis go. And then my last cut is going to be Ryan Griffin. He had a great 2019 with the Jets, was extended, but, he just couldn't recreate that in 2020. And, this only saves $1.9 million. That's not too much, honestly. But, some more cap space is better than none. And I think, it's just time to get a fresh start there. Supplement Herndon in a different way in this tight end room. So those 3 cuts save the Jets $15.5 million. And then, that tacked on to the initial $64 million, and that brings us to $79.5 million. And then the trade I'm going to make is I'm going to trade Sam Darnold to the Colts for their second round pick, number 54 overall. This would save $4.8 million and bring us to $84.3 million total. I definitely think I could see, Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas rolling the dice, going with Darnold another year, just, taking all their assets and just using them to surround Darnold with talent, whether it's at wide receiver, whether it's bolstering the offensive line with a guy like Joe Thuney or Penei Sewell, like I said, get an Allen Robinson, get a Galladay, whatever it may be, and then just use those draft picks to just surround him with talent. But that's not the way I would go. I think it's smart to reset this rookie clock. I love Sam Darnold. I really do, and I hope the best for him wherever we do send him, if we send him somewhere. But I just think it's time to start fresh, get a new energy in this franchise, whether it's Watson or whether it's drafting Zach Wilson or Justin Fields. The route I'm going to take in this situation is drafting a quarterback at number 2 overall. With that being said, we do have $84.3 million heading into free agency, or, into the period where we could re-sign our free agents. The highest priority, re-signing, and no doubt about it, is Marcus May. He's a leader of our defense. He's coming off a great season. He's mentioned that he wants to be with the Jets, right? He wants to be here long term. And Joe Douglas has mentioned that it is a high priority to bring back Marcus May. So this just looks like it's going to happen, right? So in my offseason, I'm going to give Marcus May a 3-year, $30 million deal. That's $10 million a year. He's earned this. He's one of the top safeties in the league, and let's keep him home with Gang Green. My next re-signing is going to be Brian Poole, slot corner. He's been an elite slot corner in the entire NFL since joining the Jets 2 years ago. We got to keep that continuity in the secondary. Bringing back him in May will be huge for our defense. I'm going to give him a 2-year, $14 million deal. That's $7 million a year. Wouldn't mind giving a third year, going up to 3 for 21. He deserves his contract. If not more, I think he's actually one of the more underrated players in the league. Another guy who I think is super under the radar, he's produced for the Jets, is Terrell Basham. He had 3.5 sacks last year. He's predominantly, at outside linebacker. I think he actually transitions pretty well into a 4-3 defense as a 4-3 down defensive end. He did it at Ohio in college, and I think he could recreate that here in the pros. So I think Basham, I'm going to give him a 2-year, $3 million deal. That's $1.5 million per year. I'm bringing back Neville Hewitt. He led the team in tackles, I believe. Not the best in coverage, but he's just a solid player with this 4-3 defense. I'm looking at him as more as a depth backup linebacker at the Mike spot behind C.J. Mosley. And if Mosley is a little rusty or whatever, could potentially get injured, whatever it may be, you have a guy that could produce at the NFL level. So I'm going to bring back Neville Hewitt on a 1-year, $3 million deal. The next guy I'm going to re-sign is Pat Elflein. We cut Lewis earlier in the video, so we need some depth at guard. I don't think Elflein's going to cost you too much, so I'm going to go 1 year, $1.5 million. And, I think he could battle Greg Van Roten in training camp, push him, and, who knows, maybe win the job. So I think that's a good value depth signing. Another depth signing, I'm going to go Harvey Longy. He plays like a man possessed, right? He's a wild man. I think, he's a good guy to have on the team, whether it's special teams, whether it's situational, packages or, whatever it may be, filling in. I feel like he could be a good insurance policy at either the Will linebacker spot or the Sam spot. So I'm going to go Harvey Longy, 1 year, $1.5 million as well. And then another linebacker I'm going to bring back is Frankie Louvu. I just think he's another solid backup special teams locker room guy. He could provide a little bit of edge pressure, so we're going to bring him back on a 1 year, $1 million deal. I want to mention that Longy is a restricted free agent. I didn't mention that earlier. And then the last guy I'm going to bring back is Matthias Farley. He's our special teams captain, backup safety. We need that depth. He's a veteran. And I think you could get him for around $1 million, maybe a little bit more. So that's going to wrap up my internal, my re-signings. That would be $26.5 million allocated to those guys. So if you subtract that from our 84 and change, that brings us to $57.8 million heading into free agency, right? Unrestricted free agency. The name that keeps getting floating around, right? The two names, Joe Thuney and Allen Robinson. And I want to be realistic in this. I want to, while I'm optimistic as a Jets fan, I just don't think it's realistic to think we're going to get Joe Thuney and Allen Robinson. They're both big ticket guys. They're both going to be, 2 of the top 10 free agents available. So this is where the hard decision comes into play. I'm ultimately going to roll with Allen Robinson. I think Joe Thuney is a great player and would just anchor our offensive line. But I think you could find a guard in the late first round, early second round that's elite, right? That's going to be a very, very good guard, fill right in for a couple $1 million, right? You don't have to throw $15 million a year at them. Whereas, that elite wide receiver one, that in this situation, I'm going with a young quarterback. You need to surround them with proven veterans and not wait for a rookie wide receiver to develop. So I'm going to go Allen Robinson on a 4-year, $84 million deal. That's $21 million a year. I don't think he could turn that down. He's 6'2", 220. He had 1,250 yards receiving and 6 touchdowns last year. This is an instant number 1 wide receiver for whoever I may draft when it comes time, right? Whether it's Zach Wilson or Justin Fields. So this is a surefire wide receiver 1. I'm locking him in. The next big free agency signing I'm making is Trey Hendrickson, the defensive end from the New Orleans Saints. He had 13 and a half sacks last year. He's 6'4", 270. So I don't know if I would consider him like a speed rusher, right? But like he's a great sack artist, and I think we could really use him. I love Yannick, and I think, Shaquille Barrett would be a great signing, but I just don't think those two guys, get free from their teams. I think they're going to lock them into long-term deals or franchise tag, whatever it may be. But I think Hendrickson will hit the open market because the New Orleans Saints are in such big cap trouble. You know what I mean? They have so many guys. They're so over the cap that I don't think they could bring back Trey Hendrickson. So he's going to, get loose, and I think we're going to lock him up for a 3-year, or in this case, I'm going to give him a 3-year, $30 million deal. I don't know if that's going to be enough, but I think it's, in that ballpark, especially with the reduced cap. But I think that would be a great target for us and get one of those key defensive ends that we need in this Robert Saleh defense. My next free agency signing is going to be Richard Sherman. This one, I think the writing's on the wall, right? So Richard Sherman, cornerback, obviously with the San Francisco 49ers, previously with the Seattle Seahawks. He's not what he once was, but he's still a leader. He's still a big locker room guy. He's a smart player, and he knows Robert Saleh's defense. He's spoken so highly of Saleh. It just seems like this is going to happen. I think this is a solid stopgap, and you bring in him, and then you also bring back Poole and, Marcus May, and that's a lot of veteran leadership there in your secondary. So I'm going to bring in Richard Sherman on a 2-year, $14 million deal. That's $7 million a year. Another signing, Jamal Williams, running back from the Green Bay Packers. He's great when he's been given the opportunity. He's been kind of in a jammed up backfield when it comes to Aaron Jones this year, A.J. Dillon, but, he's been great when he does play. He can catch the ball a little bit. I think he'll thrive in our committee here in New York that I'm going to build. I think we could get him for a 3-year, $12 million deal. That's $4 million a year. Some other options if we want to go with some of the San Francisco guys that are used to Shanahan offense, right? Whether it's Jeff Wilson Jr., who was really good when given a chance last year, but he's a restricted free agent. You could go Jerick McKinnon or Tevin Coleman. And then other guys I really like Philip Lindsay, but he's a restricted free agent. Marlon Mack's a potential, signing. And then Chris Carson, if we want to go big. I don't see the Jets getting into that $8 to $10 million range with a running back after the whole Le'Veon thing, but you never know. And then lastly, my last free agent signing is going to be Tyrod Taylor. We're going to go 1 year, $3 million deal. He might demand a little bit more than that, but in that range, he's a veteran who has backed up young quarterbacks who have become successful, whether it's Herbert, Baker Mayfield, you know what I mean? He's done it, and I think that's a solid guy for our young QB to have in the room with him, because Tyrod, he's a smart player, he's a good player. I just think that would be all around a nice signing for the Jets. All those deals, those would come to about $45 million total a year, and then if you take that from our 57 and change, that would leave us with $12.8 million left. And you're going to need, a good chunk of money to sign your draft picks and to just have some emergency money for injuries during the season, whatever it may be. But I don't know if 12.8 is exactly enough. So they might need to structure deals in a little bit different way, you know what I mean? Whether it's deferring money later in the contract or, signing bonus, whatever it is. But I think that's a pretty solid range, right? We're coming away with around $13 million left over. So now we're going to get to the fun part, right? To the NFL draft. The Jets have a ton of draft capital, and we could really solidify this franchise, solidify the foundation. This is what I would do. So at number 2 overall, I'm taking the quarterback. I know this is going to be a debate right until draft day, whether it's Zach Wilson or Justin Fields. I do feel like a lot of Jets fans are starting to lean Zach Wilson, and I don't blame them. But in this case, I'm going to take Justin Fields. I think he just has his physical tools are just too much to pass up on for me. 6'3", 228. He runs, I think, like a 4.4, right? He had 67 passing touchdowns in his career and only 9 interceptions, playing very good competition in the Big Ten. He's just a guy that I always expected to get the win, and that's a guy I want as my quarterback. And, the big knock on him, right, is that he might hold the ball too long, or he might not read the field great. Like Wilson might be more advanced at that. But Saleh keeps saying, in his press conferences and radio interviews that the Shanahan-LaFleur offense is so QB friendly, right? Like it makes the decisions so easy for them. So if you're making the decisions easy for Justin Fields, and he has this crazy physical like upside, right? He has all this potential. Like, you get him comfortable and you get him making smart throws the first couple of a year or two, and then he's just going to blossom into a superstar, in my opinion. But I do want to make it clear that I'd be very, very happy with Zach Wilson. I think he's going to be a great player as well. You won't hear any complaining from me on draft day if they go Zach Wilson. So that's the way I would go. I think Justin Fields is just has too much untapped potential for me to pass up on. Like you said, if we roll with Darnold also and we build around him, so be it. You know what I mean? I trust Joe Douglas as an evaluator. I trust Robert Saleh as a coach. Trust Mike LaFleur. So if that's the route they feel like is going to give us the best chance to be successful, then I'm all for it. But in this case, I'm going to take Justin Fields at 2. At 23, we mentioned we need that speed rusher defensive end in Robert Saleh's defense. We did get Trey Hendrickson in free agency. He's going to provide a huge boost at 1 DN spot. But I'm going to take Jalen Phillips from the University of Miami, defensive end. I went to the University of Miami, so I'm a little bit biased here. But I watched him day in and day out, and this kid is an absolute beast, physical freak. He was once the number 1 overall recruit in the country. I don't think many people know that. He went to UCLA, was a 5-star, number 1 overall. And he was a solid player, but he had a lot of injury. He entered the transfer portal, came to Miami, and he just came back a different player. I think he put on 50 pounds of muscle. The dude's 6'5". Phillips is 266 pounds, pure muscle. He's got power. He's got speed. He is everything you could draw up in a 4-3 defensive end, and that's exactly what they ran at Miami under Manny Diaz. He had great success. He had 8 sacks this year, and I just can't wait. I think he will be an NFL superstar, and I think getting him at 23 is unbelievable value. I wouldn't be shocked if he blows away all those crazy metrics when it comes to testing pre-draft process, and he goes even higher than that. But right now, I think he's in that range, so let's pull the trigger on Jalen Phillips at 23. We get our speed defensive end to come in and just take out the QB, you know what I mean? Get that pressure, have that edge rusher that we haven't had in years. And you pair him with Trey Hendrickson, forget about it. So then at 34 in the second round, our first pick in the second round, I'm going to go with Wyatt Davis, the guard from Ohio State. He's a big boy, 6'4", 310. This, like I said, it came down to the decision, are we going to go with Joe Thuney and a wide receiver like maybe Corey Davis or draft a receiver early, or are we going to go Allen Robinson and draft a guard early? And this is the route that I ended up going. I think that, you could get great production out of an early second round guard, or if we take him at 23. In this case, Justin Fields has familiarity with Wyatt Davis protecting him. He was his guard at Ohio State, and I just think this is a natural fit. With the 54th pick in the second round, this is the pick that I mocked up in the Darnold trade from the Colts. I have us taking Asante Samuel, cornerback from Florida State. I think he'd fit great into Saleh's defense. He's a playmaker. I think he had 3 picks this year in 8 games. He might not be there either, honestly, but I'm trying to, ballpark the ranges here. If he's not there, maybe a guy like Tyson Campbell. I know this isn't a particularly deep corner class, but I think a solid prospect should be sitting there at 54 for us. With our first and second round picks, we went QB, defensive end, then we went guard, corner, right? So we're addressing some of our big needs so far. With our first pick in the third round, number 66 overall, I have us taking Chaz Surratt, linebacker from UNC. This kid is an amazing athlete, came in as a quarterback to UNC. His last 2 years transitioned to a linebacker. He just does everything. He could cover, he could rush the passer, he could stop the run. In his 2 seasons as a linebacker in 2019, 115 tackles and 6.5 sacks. And then in last year in 2 less games, he had 91 tackles and 6 sacks. So he's very productive. I think he could slide right in as our starting strong side Sam linebacker, right? And wrap up our core of Mosley, Surratt, and then we'll give Cashman the shot. And if it doesn't work out, we have Harvey Longy there. And with our second third round pick, number 87 overall, I believe, I'm going running back. I'm going Chuba Hubbard. In 2019, he was in Heisman. He was in the Heisman talks. I think he might have been a finalist or a semifinalist. He went for over 2,000 yards rushing, and he went for 21 rushing touchdowns. Last year, he definitely regressed. He didn't keep up that pace. I think he went for but under 1,000 yards. So he's going to slip in the draft, right? He probably will be here at this point, and I think it's worth taking him and letting him flourish in that Mike LaFleur system and as a part of our committee. Along with Jamal Williams, Ty Johnson, and LaMichael Pirine, right? So I think this would be a good pick. I could also see like a Kenneth Gainwell here out of Memphis. He's an electrifying player. Javonte Williams from UNC, if he's here, that's a no-brainer. And then Trey Sermon, if you want to reunite him with Justin Fields and Wyatt Davis. With our fourth round pick, I'm going to go Hunter Long, the tight end from Boston College. 57 catches for 685 yards and 5 touchdowns last year as a junior. Like I mentioned, I went to Miami. I watched a lot of these ACC games. He's a guy that really jumped off the screen for me. I think he's going to be a great player at the next level as a pro. 5th round, I'm going center here. Trey Hill from Georgia. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know too much about these late round centers, but I kind of just looked through a list. Guys would be in the range. He impressed me out of those guys. So he's 6'4", 330. I just really want to back up center for McGovern. I think, we need some depth there, and this could be a good pick. With my next 5th round pick, I'm taking Daz Newsome, wide receiver out of UNC. He did go for over 1,000 yards in 2019 with 10 touchdowns this year. He also regressed a little bit. I think that's why he'll be available here in the 5th round. He went for 684 yards and 6 touchdowns. So that's our second UNC player. They had an electric offense. Sam Howell is the QB. They had Javonte Williams, as I mentioned, at running back. Daz Newsome at wide out. Great offense. I think he'd be a great depth piece for us as our number 4 or 5 receiver. And then with our last pick, I think we need to take some depth at defensive tackle, play behind Foley Fatukasi, a guy who could stop the run. I'm going Naquan Jones here from Michigan State. I like the interior offensive line. I don't know too much about these interior defensive line guys this late in the draft, but he's 6'4", 340, and I think he could stop the run. So I think a guy like this could be a good pick. So I just want to wrap it up, the positional groups, because we made a lot of changes here. We picked up a lot of guys. We might have let some guys go, right? And then we drafted some players. So let's take a look at what it could look like. So quarterback, I have Justin Fields and Tyrod Taylor. I feel like that's a very solid group. You have the leadership of Tyrod. You have the untapped potential of Fields. I think they'll complement each other well. Running back, we have a committee of Jamal Williams, who we signed, Chuba Hubbard, who we drafted in the 3rd round, Ty Johnson, who showed flashes this year, and then LaMichael Pirine, who was our 4th round pick last year. So I think that's a pretty solid group. At wide receiver, we have our clear-cut wide receiver 1 in Allen Robinson. We have Crowder in the slot, Denzel Mims on the outside, and then we also have Daz Newsome, who we drafted, Berrios as our backup slot. Your 6th receiver, it could be whoever you want, whether it's a low-level vet free agent, late pick. I don't know how many wide receivers we'll draft here. Or it could be a guy that's already on under contract, like a Lawrence Cager, right, as our 6th receiver. At tight end, I have Chris Herndon, Hunter Long, who we drafted in the 4th round, and then Trevon Wesco is our 3 tight ends. I think this is a decent group. Not a strength, I wouldn't say, but an okay group. At left tackle, we're going to have Becton, and I believe McDermott we already gave an extension, so we'll have him backing him up there. Left guard, we're going to have Wyatt Davis, who we drafted in the 2nd round, and then Cam Clark or Elfline, whoever you want to be the backup there. Cam Clark we drafted last year. At center, we're going to have Connor McGovern, who really turned it on towards the end of the year. And then our late, 5th round backup center pick, whether it's Trey Hill or someone else. Right guard, we're going to have Greg Van Roten and then Elfline battling it out. We'll see who wins it there. Or maybe Elfline goes to back up the rookie and Clark backs up Greg Van Roten. Who knows how that's going to play out. And then at right tackle, we're going to stick with George Fant, and then we have Chuma Doga as his backup. That's our offense side of the ball. I think, there's some big improvements. Obviously, there's going to be some growing pains with Justin Fields, or many of you might take Zach Wilson either way, but I think it's solid there. On the defensive side of the ball, we're going to have Trey Hendrickson at defensive end. We'll have Phillips, as a backup, but then, or maybe not even a backup, but just like situational, right? Like pass rush, Phillips is always going to be on the field. And then you're going to have Basham behind him. Your defensive tackle spots, your starters are going to be Quinnen and Foley Fatukasi, and then you're going to have Nathan Shepard backing up Quinnen and Naquan Jones backing up Foley or whoever, your D tackle is, and then your late defensive tackle pick. And then our other D end, I'm going to have Jonathan Franklin Myers and Zuniga. Jonathan Franklin Myers, when it's a passing down, like 3rd down, I would have him slide to Foley's spot and then bring Hendrickson over, right? So you're going to have, on passing situations, you're going to have Trey Hendrickson, Jalen Phillips, Quinnen Williams, and Jonathan Franklin Myers on the defensive line. That would be an insane group, and we would just get after the passer, and that solid defense would be going, right? But so that would round out our defensive line group. As my will linebackers, I have Cashman and Harvey Longy, right? We mentioned them earlier. As my Mike, I'm going to have Mosley backed up by Neville Hewitt. And then as my Sam linebacker, I'm going to have Surratt backed up by Luvu. And then Bryce Huff, I think you could kind of slide around, whether it's defensive line or outside linebacker. I also want to mention about Zuniga. I talked about him briefly before. He played a 4-3 at Florida and was a very, very good player. So I think that, he could be a solid contributor also to this defensive front 7. Moving into the secondary, our corners, we're going to have our starters as Sherman. We're going to have Poole in the slot, and then Asante Samuel as the other corner, and then, Brian challenge him for that starting job. And then I'm going to have Bless Austin backing up Sherman and Javelin Guidry backing up Brian Poole in the slot. So I think that's a very good group as well. Not very good, but very good compared to last year, right? Like, we had all those injuries and stuff, and, we had multiple undrafted free agents starting multiple weeks. So, definitely an improvement. And then our safeties, we're going to have Marcus May and Ashton Davis backed up by Matthias Farley. And we'll probably need a fourth safety as a backup, whether that's a guy already on the roster or a low-level vet, right? So I think overall that this group can compete. This would be, a huge improvement over what we had in 2020, and I would love to see what this team could do under Robert Saleh. There's plenty of directions the Jets could go, whether it's Deshaun Watson, whether it's Zach Wilson, whether it's Justin Fields or Sam Darnold. That's the big question of the offseason. We'll see how they handle it. Let me know what you guys would do, like what your mock offseason would be. Comment some players below that you like, and just thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and go Jets.